Morning everyone and welcome to Astral Group Limited's pre-close briefing session for the year ending 30 September 2023. Chris Kitter, CEO, will give a short recap of the SENS announcement relating to the voluntary trading updates and initial trading statement released this morning, after which we will open the platform for questions. The Astral team includes Dries Ferreira, CFO, Gary Arnold, Group COO, and Frans van Heerden, MD Poultry Commercial. Should you wish to ask a question, you can either type your question in the question tab at the bottom of your screen or press the request to speak button also at the bottom of your screen. Please note that we have set out 2 hours for this session. As Astral is going into a closed period, no additional one-on-one meetings nor interviews will be or could be accommodated. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Marlies, and welcome to all the people that have logged into this pre-close briefing. It's the first one in many years, and obviously it's not a good one, as you will all deduct from the SENS announcement. So we are not in a happy space here, but it is what it is, and we will demonstrate to you where and how this happened during this presentation based on your questions and answers. All the information that we can talk about is already included in the SENS announcement. A similar press release to the same extent with regard to information has been released early this morning. So whatever we could say within the parameters of what we are allowed to say prior to audited results is included in this briefing session, as well as in the SENS and the press release. So besides that, there's very little else that we can include or divulge or communicate. However, most, I am sure, of your questions could shed some light of the things that you could find unclear in the SENS release. So again, welcome. We'll try our absolute best to answer your questions as best as we can. If we can't at this very moment, we'll take a note and we'll come back to you in due course. If you remember, or if you follow Astral, we informed the market during the interim results released on 22nd May that a significant cost impact from load shedding would continue for the remainder of our financial year, meaning from April through to September. These costs amounted to close on 750 million rand for the first 6 months, ended 31 March. And then we forecasted 920 million for the remainder of the financial year. These are costs related directly to the impact of load shedding. The forecast we now provide in May was 844 million. This takes the total cost of load shedding, and the impact thereof on an integrated poultry business, including 200 million rand capital cost for constructing diesel generator plants and complexes, and also to build our own water reserves to try and alleviate the pressure from day-to-day water interruptions. That in total was 200 million for the year. There's still some capex that we are planning in the near future, and when I talk about over the next year or two, based on affordability, to further assist us in our independence from infrastructures from the authorities. The total then load shedding cost, including capital, amounts to 1.9 billion for the financial year of F23. This has been the main reason and for the severe decline in Astral's results ending 30 September. if you will recall what our profitability was the prior year at approximately 1.2 billion. And now this year we get this additional backhand of 1.9 billion. So if you do a direct correlation between the two, it could have been a fairly average to good year for us if we did not have this enormous impact and the direct and indirect impact from load shedding. We can report that the backlog in the slaughter program, this big bird phenomenon that we spoke about, and if you understand the integration, and we have explained that in the past, we've got a 2.5-year planning program, a JIT program, just in time. So for 2.5 years, every bird, every third minute of the day knows exactly where it's going. Is it going into rearing? Is it going into a hatchery? Is it going onto a broiler farm? Is it going onto a GP farm? So that is planned absolutely to pinpoint our efficiency of integration. We buy the raw materials to feed those birds. So that works like a Swiss clock. And that is most probably what has distinguished us over the past 10, 15 years, putting us in the so-called position as the #1 or primary producer of poultry in Southern Africa. Now that has been severely interrupted. If you have load shedding in an abattoir and you can't slaughter that specific bird, it has to wait. And if it waits long enough and you can't slaughter it, you must send it back to the farm. Once it's on the farm, you must reorder feed. Now it's a bigger bird, more stressed, and you have to feed it for prolonged days, and so on, up eventually till all your farms are full. You don't have open time like you normally have between two placements of 10 to 14 days. Then your day-old chicks start to back up in your eggs, and your hatcheries get full, and then your production or your breeding program starts to get impacted. So it was a massive organization, and in that process, we had birds that we normally process or move to an abattoir at the age of about 33 days. With an average weight of 1.850 kilos, now had to back up and farm. There was an enormous additional feed cost to feed those birds. We had some birds coming into the abattoirs at the age of 50 days, almost double what we normally. So imagine an additional 20 days you have to feed a bird while it is now bigger. And then you bring a big bird in an abattoir, and your whole abattoir setup, your equipment is not to slaughter a 3.5 kilo bird, but a 1.850. So the impact was enormous. What we can now say is, with all the efforts of our management team on the farms in all aspects of the game, we set ourselves targets. We had a specific program called Reset, Refocus, Restart. On the morning of 16 June, we were back to a normalized production program. So that means our birds could be sent to an abattoir at on average age of 33 days with a weight of 1.50. So the big bird phenomenon, except for the finished good stocks, was normalized. And I can report that our on-farm results is now very good. As a matter of fact, there's a slight improvement from pre-load shedding. So it's going well on our farms, and that is the basis for our business going forward. The big birds, unfortunately, forced us to participate in an extensive deep cut promotional activity in the wholesale and retail sector. That coincided with Astral having to unfortunately pack the big bird format into a very limited product range. You can't pack a big bird with portions now twice the size in a 2 kg bag. Because instead of having 13 pieces, now you're only going to have 6 pieces. That didn't work well. So most of that big bird product period went into 5 kgs. The market was flooded. We had a huge stock buildup, and that product had to be discounted way, way below the cost of production. This obviously, unfortunately, also during the winter session, where there's a normal slowdown in chicken consumption, seen poultry selling prices under severe pressure. And we were not able to recover some of the basic costs, like the additional feed cost, because feed prices peaked. And if you read Anthony Clark's reports, we saw a peak in soya price and maize price. So we now have a big bird that we have to feed for longer at the most expensive feed in our history. Then you pack it in a pack size that are not the primary pack for the market, and you discount it, and we could, up to date, not recover that additional cost. And as you will deduct, we tried to put a handle on, in the sense is that these additional costs, especially associated with load shedding, is an indication of approximately 3 rand per kilo of increased costs that we were not able, not Astral, the industry. Maybe our cost was a bit higher because of our geographic location and where load shedding occurred and where the water interruptions occurred. But that's the extent, more or less. Now, if you immediately going to ask me how much will the price of chicken go up, we'll discuss it throughout the morning. It is not as simple as that. We sold chicken at a price level below the production cost thereof. If we make a quick sum and we look at all angles and you want a figure, it was approximately 3 rand a kilo. The South African poultry industry, of course, now, and I think it's the talk of the town, is avian influenza or bird flu. We are currently ravaged by that. It started off with a strain that we have dealt with before. This strain have mutated into a different strain, especially up north around the Greater Gauteng or the Old Transvaal area. And that strain is killing the birds, unfortunately, like flies. As we sit here at this moment, we get updates on a half hour, and the phones keep on pinging for information coming through about new birds being affected, impacted, not just in Astral, but the whole of the poultry fraternity. Egg-producing layers, as well as broiler breeders. This virus is not in broilers. It is in the breeders, and Gary will have the right terminology. We talk about long-lived birds, and it's created havoc. There's a huge percentage of breeders that used to produce a fertile egg where we get a broiler from that has already been culled or killed, that's been infected. What you must be reminded of here, by law, we as producers are obliged to cull, or for a harsher word, kill birds that are infected, simply as a control measure for the further spread of this disease. The unfortunate thing, South Africa, as it's known for many things, is the only country in the world where poultry producers are not compensated for forced culling of birds by law. Anywhere else in the world, As a control measure, if you are forced to cull a bird, their governments and their governmental infrastructures come onto your farm, they take control, they quarantine it, they kill the birds, they dispose of them, and 7 days later you have a check in your bank as compensation, and they help you to test with sentinels, and you can replace in about 3 weeks' time and carry on with your life. In South Africa, there's no compensation, and that brings about 1 or 2 complications that we are concerned in. Are people culling at the rate they should as a control measure by law, or because of the fact that they're not compensated, they are hiding this disease or not culling at the rate which they should? That builds up a viral load in the high density area and attributes to the further spread. So there's a two-edged sword here. Compensate people and we will control this. And if you don't want to compensate me, allow me to vaccinate. And Gary will elaborate a lot on the efforts and actions he is currently busy with regard to vaccination, and also our fight to get the law to do what it says it's going to do with regard to compensation. The bird flu in the egg fraternity works a bit different than in the broiler fraternity. If you lose a layer bird, you lose the egg tomorrow and there's 1 egg short in the market. Now, what we believe, there has been millions of layer birds, and we've just heard overnight and this morning of more massive laying bird complexes that's been affected or positive for this disease, for the bird flu. So this is not seen the back end of bird flu. So they will be purely based on a linear calculation, a massive, long-lasting shortage of table eggs in the market. In the broiler industry, it works a bit different. It happens in your breeders, not in your broilers, not in the chicken that you eat in your table. So if one of those chickens might have died, a broiler, there would be a shortage the next day. But this happens in our breeding facilities, which means beyond the breeding facility, there's a pipeline in the market. So if we draw a direct linear program from when breeders are culled or when they die to when it will physically impact a shortage of a broiler, is approximately 2.5 months. So whatever you've seen or heard in the market about bird flu, it will not have a direct impact on the shortage of broilers in the short term. We project that impact would only be seen in the 1st to the 2nd week of December. Gary will divulge some figures. What we know as we sit here today, this poultry industry produces about, let's round it off, 22 million birds per week, broilers that are produced for the consumer market. If we draw the linear program of how many breeders have been culled in the industry, the figure we can quote that we have on the record, it's not our figure, it comes from the authorities. There's already, as of 4 o'clock last night, yesterday afternoon, 1.5 million breeders that has been culled, depleted, or died. If you draw a linear program from that, eventually those breeders would have produced approximately 4.9 million broilers per week over a spread of periods. So, and this is not to create panic. This is a linear projection. It won't happen one morning on one day. It could happen over a period of 4 months. But if you don't restock your breeders at the same rate as what you have culled them, eventually this market could be short based on yesterday's figures. Approximately 20% of broiler supply into the market, not on one day, but over a period of time. So we look at it that way and say, eventually there's going to be a vacuum. It could be spread over 4 to 6 months. So not creating panic, but a huge risk. It will definitely impact or distort supply and demand of broiler meat to the rate of table eggs, just not immediately and just not so severe in one specific period. It will be spread over a period of time. Gary will also explain later that Astral, because of its integration, its mitigating plans we've had since 2017 with regard to how we manage the business and capacity, we had a couple of levers to pull to assist us in the short term to not impact the broiler market. With that, I close my introduction. The rest of the 1 3/4 hour is open to all our guests online now. So we now move into a Q&A. I've got my full team here. I also have the honor of having our lead non-executive director, also chief of audit and risk, Mr. Diederik Fouché, in the room. So any questions that you want to pose outside of this management team, there is also a senior member of our board in this meeting this morning. So thank you for that time. Over to our guests.
Thank you, Chris. The first question is from PJ Prinsloo from Centaur. Is the 25% balance sheet gearing based on gross or net debt? Is the 25% balance sheet gearing based on gross or net debt?
Dries Ferreira, just intro.
So thank you for the question, PJ. The calculation is based on net debt. Also, the second part of the question regarding the insight on how much cash, the calculation is as a result of the net debt calculation based on the fact that we're looking at the cash, the GBF's general banking facilities as one at this stage. And we've got sufficient liquidity profiles that create headroom in that picture. And obviously, as a result of good support from our finance suppliers, the banks, we've got sufficient headroom within that 25% to deal with the current environment that we're facing.
Thank you. Charles Host from Bateleur Capital. Morning. The bird flu breakout was positive for poultry selling prices post 2017. Can we expect the same to happen this time around?
Thank you, Charles. Well, there's two aspects about this. And I don't want to talk about a price increase. But the first thing we have to achieve is a price correction, is to recover the lost margin because of load shedding, additional feed cost, now the cost of avian influenza. So this has not got nothing to, what I'm talking about is not nothing to do with the supply and demand phenomenon of a commodity. So on a very clear instruction with a very clearly paved route, we must first recover the so-called 3 rand. It might be 270 or 350. We give a figure there because it's a moving target. It changes day by day. The first thing is to recover that. that actions has already been triggered. So as we sit here, we will have a concise effort to, over the next 2 months, try to claw back lost margin, not profiteering. That we will do. We already had 2 or 3 very hard conversations with our key customers. We've explained the dire situation of both Astral and the industry to them, and I think the penny has dropped. Now the question, if you do that, if the price is corrected, not increased, corrected by 3 rand, what will the impact be on the consumer? The price elasticity is unknown on chicken. It is not a clear calculation. We'll test that together with some of our key customers who's got the ability. So we might see, if you correct the price, this is pre, and I state again, this is pre the impact of bird flu. As I explained, that supply and demand imbalance will only most probably come to the market in the middle of December. So our first effort is to claw back lost margin. And if there's anybody from the media here that want to use the words of a price increase or profiteering, come and see my audited books. We're working on a negative margin. I'm not profiteering, I'm clawing back input costs. Any commodity, especially a feed, primary feed producer in this country, has got the obligation to recover his input cost. If you don't do that, there is no sustainability in food security. So the first quick answer, Charles, and this will most probably answer most of the people's questions. We're going to claw back that 3 rand. How are we going to do it? There's a plan, and it goes together with lower placements, because maybe we're producing too many chickens. Now comes the phenomenon of supply and demand, and maybe a vacuum caused by avian influenza. That we'll see in December. How big it will be, at what time, at what rate, what producer was impacted pre the other one? Was it the producer supplying the QSR market or the IQF? That is unknown. We only have our own information. As we sit here with today's information, Astral is not projecting that itself will see a shortage of broilers in the medium term. We've got too many spare levers to pull up to assist us. We've built an egg bank, also at a cost, our own cost, not our customers' cost, to try and foresee this situation, because we knew the level of AI across the globe and it was going to come here, and at a cost. We've built in some capacity to alleviate the immediate impact. If this infection rate continues at the rate it's continuing now, we will know exactly at what point, when we lose how many breeders, will it have a direct impact on broiler supply 8 weeks later. That we don't know at this time, but we're getting closer and closer day by day. This infection and the rate thereof with this new strain is unstoppable, as we get reports by the hour of more and more infections, and now not just in the Gauteng complex, it jumps to areas in the far north, in the far west, across. It's an airborne virus. Most wild birds are already infected by this. It's an airborne virus. This time around, with all your biosecurity measures that we do at a huge cost, additional cost, has not protected us. So first, and I say this to everybody on the system today, we've got a very clear plan to pull back the 3 rand that we have lost in margin because of input cost, then will we evaluate. The key thing is here, not a commodity normally works like that. If there's a shortage, the price go up. If there's an oversupply, there's a normal market condition that gets applied to commodities. As it has already happened in eggs, and in maize, and in soya, it's a commodity. Most probably the same trend will follow broilers. In 2017, we had huge AI. In 2018, we had our best financial result ever. If they were correlated, I don't know, some professor must come and tell me. But this could also happen, I hope, not to the detriment of our already strained consumers. We will be very sensitive to that. Thank you. That was the short answer.
Thank you. We'll take the audio question from Masifo.
Gary,
Masifo, please go ahead.
there's the question. Not the type one.
Andre?
Masifo, you can go ahead. Masifo, are you there?
When we go on to the next question from Lawando. Are you realizing any impacts on pricing from the imposed anti-dumping duty so far?
Gary, you want to answer?
Thanks, Lwanda. Obviously, there won't be any pricing impacts on us from the imposed anti-dumping duty. The anti-dumping duty was implemented on the 1st of August, and that's against Brazil and 4 European countries. It was a duty, far-ranging duty that's applied to a number of companies and countries at different levels. The average duty on Brazil was 21%. That duty, anti-dumping duty, will be imposed on top of the MFN duty on frozen imported or bone-in portions and boneless cuts of 62%. So any imported frozen bone-in chicken will attract that duty from August. And that will happen in the market unless, and that will obviously be on imported product, of which we don't import. But the importers that are importing product, that duty will be applied. Unless the country of origin changes their FOB pricing, which we have seen the Brazilians and others do in the past. They merely adapt their pricing, they need to get rid of the product. They've already made up the cost of their chicken on their primary cuts in their country. And generally, when you see dumped product in our country, it's dumped at a price way below their production. So if they want to keep those volumes moving, they may adjust their pricing at the point of origin. We can't control that, but there is an anti-dumping duty now that is imposed to try and discourage dumping and unfair trade.
And the direct, has there been any impact on pricing of local producers on the back of these tariffs? The quick answer is no.
Thank you. We'll go over to Anthony Clark. Audio questions.
Hello, Chris, Gary, and the team. Thank you so much for the very candid answers this morning you've given us in a very difficult industry. You've seen what I produce, and I cover the listed and unlisted sector in poultry and, of course, in eggs. I want to direct a question regarding AI and specifically in the day-old chicks. You saw the note that I put out yesterday regarding the impact to day-old chicks, and I heard this morning of even more cases of AI at breeder farms, again, in the Greater Transvaal area, affecting some of your other competitors, which is quite concerning in the run-up to the festive period. Can you just give us an update, please, as to what you think the real impact could be in the day-old chick market? Because I know what a day-old chick egg costs. There's even talk that some may be importing eggs to try and meet the underlying requirement needs. And I've been running around this week, and I'm also aware that retailers have been calling around the large producers to try and ascertain will they actually have product in the system to meet festive demand, which is quite interesting, where you now have the upper hand as a sector compared to the last few years where you've been in the back foot. So those are my general queries, please, if you can give me some color on those.
Eddie, you answer the first part on that, and then I'll...
Anthony, morning. Thanks for the question. Look, as Chris mentioned earlier on, the latest information we have is that around 1.5 million broiler breeders have been culled. Now, Anthony, that figure is moving every day. It depends on the spread of the disease across some large farming complexes and regions. And as you said yourself, in the last couple of days, there have been new cases reported in Limpopo and Northwest and in Mpumalanga. So the disease is spreading at a rapid rate, and of course, that becomes a moving target. I have seen some of your reports in the week where you spoke of approximately 6 million chicks. We've done our calculations based on average flock ages, the average production of a breeding hen over its life cycle, and we estimate that about 4.9 to 5 million broilers per week will be lost at a point in time. It doesn't happen immediately because you have this pipeline that Chris spoke about earlier on. So if I produce an egg today, I hang on to that egg for a few days in my egg bank. As we're setting every day for broiler production, as in our processing plants through the week of slaughtering, you'll be setting in your hatchery. That egg is then in your hatchery for 3 weeks, 21 days incubation period. You then take that chick and you place it on a farm, and on average, it'll be on farm for anywhere between 32 to 34 days of age. So let's say you've got another 5 weeks. So effectively, there's always an 8 to 9 week, if you include your egg bank pipeline, that has product in it, in the broiler supply chain. Now, it depends whether you as a producer have any capacity that you can top up that egg bank with and keep your pipeline as full as far as possible, or not. I mean, if you lose a breeder today, you lose the egg, just as a commercial laying hen. Except with a commercial laying hen, you don't have an 8 to 9 week buffer of egg stock. You lose that table egg almost immediately. So therein lies the difference, and that's why Chris says from today, and in fact from a couple of days ago, the market has been short supplied chicks. But that comes in at an exponential rate. It doesn't come in immediately, and with more and more breeders being culled, there are more and more hatching eggs, more and more less hatching eggs being set in the hatcheries across the country. So that impact, the full impact, will be felt somewhere in December. And again, it depends how people, what contingency plans they have to maybe guard against an impact on their operations. I mean, you've already mentioned hatching egg imports. That comes at a significant cost. I mean, you can appreciate with the strength of the rand or the weakness of the rand, and then the air, you have to air freight these eggs in and in significant quantities. That comes at a cost. So unless you are assured of being able some way to recover that cost, it's got to make financial sense. You're again not just going to import an egg now at a cost significantly higher than your own hatching egg cost in country. Place it in the hatchery, put it on the broiler farm, feed it, have all the input costs, diesel costs, everything else, and then you're not assured of recovering it in the selling price for chicken. So that again is a completely different calculation on its own.
Anthony, the second part is from the day that we saw the first break of AI in Dalmas in layers, we realized that this could be the worst situation with regard to bird flu. We started to strategically build finished goods stocks. So beside the longer lead time of 8 to 10 weeks we have before you feel the pressure of not placing a chick and not slaughtering, we have also built strategic stock, which under normal circumstances would have been abnormal, but we now believe our finished goods stock will steer us in good course and is there for a strategic reason. And we can almost tell our customers and the consumer that from an Astral perspective, we will not short supply the market right up to the end of December.
Thank you, Chris. Bisani Mishome from Kela Securities would like to know, to what extent does imported poultry products fill the gap in the supply of poultry meat?
Additionally, imported poultry meat has made up about 30% of local consumption. Given the average import levels of the past year, 12 months, that the imported poultry makes up about 24 to 25% of local consumption. So the industry there isn't a local gap in the supply of poultry. Poultry production, in fact, has been increased over the past 3 years with the investment that the industry made on processing capacity in support of the poultry sector master plan. Additional processing capacity was created so that more local production would make up a greater proportion of consumption. That was achieved to a degree, but you see that now imports make up a slightly lower level of consumption. So we talk about a gap. We have always said as an industry, we can compete against imports, poultry imports, at the right landed price of the import tariffs and duties. However, we will have always had a quarrel with dumping, because dumped product arrives on our shores at a price way below that price with which that country that sends it here can produce it. That is the reason for the anti-dumping duties. Anti-dumping duties were regulated and implemented on the back of facts and data, which the industry was able to demonstrate to ITAC that there was financial harm to the industry on dumped poultry products into South Africa. So there was never a gap. It was just opportunistic, and it was a product that another country didn't need that was dumped onto our shores. So high levels of imports into the country, yes, but certainly the industry has been building capacity to take up more and more of the supply and into local consumption.
Thank you. To get second Maleke from Business Report. Has Astral engaged with government and had the discussion of payments on bird culling, and if yes, what have been their response?
Thank you, Diket Singh. The short answer is a very clear yes, and Gary has been involved in that since 2017, and he'll give you an update.
Yeah, the answer is yes, and we do have an ongoing legal matter in this regard. So perhaps as many people say out there, it's sub judice. All I can say is that we have challenged this. We've challenged draft guidelines that were brought out in December 2017, which were brought out by DALOD as compensation guidelines for the culling of infected and in contact poultry. We were successful in having those guidelines put aside so that any compensation claims would be adjudicated under the Animal Diseases Act, where compensation can be granted in the case of culling of infected livestock as a disease control measure. The industry, Astral in particular, has a particular position on this. One argument, the authorities see otherwise, but it's an ongoing matter that is we are engaging with, and it's all I can say. It's in the courts.
Thank you. Susan Marie from Class Media. Maybe I missed this, but what will be the financial impact of avian influenza, both new and old strain, beyond Astral's balance sheet for this financial year that's ending in September 2023? And what does your projections say about the impact of AI for the coming year?
Susan, thank you. Normaalweg sal ons Afrikaans praat, maar as gevolg van Gary en die verhoor hierso sal ek maar Engels praat. But Suzanne, the cost as we sit here up to yesterday, the direct impact of avian influenza on the company, and that has got two tiers to it. The one tier is the loss of a biological asset. The other part is the cost related to that of disposing and cleaning. That amount adds up to, yesterday on the figures we had, impact for this year, again up to yesterday, of 220 million rand. So that would have been typical, our claim for this period for compensation. That is in line the way we calculated with international best practice, how to calculate your loss. So that would have been a typical claim, but that cost is now for our account 220 million rand. Unfavorable inventory. At this point in time, our inventory of finished goods is not impacted yet. That was, what's
That's Emil.
Oh, that's Emil. Hello, Emil. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. That's Emil from Standard Bank is asking, good morning, what is the current situation of Astral's higher unfavorable inventory? And will this continue into the first quarter of 2024? And when do you think this will normalize?
So, Emil, short, we've got a model stock that we talk about. We approximately have finished goods of 40% more than our model stock. It could be later this week as high as 50. So from having excessive stock has now changed into strategic stock. This will have a positive impact for Astral at the time when the industry, and maybe Astral included in that, have a shortage of current new stock. So we will use that stock strategically to supply our customers and to ensure that the end consumer is not short of chicken over December. So we will most probably dribble out that excessive finished goods stocks over the next 3 to 4 months at a rate that we believe is best for the market. We will manage it very carefully. We're not just going to move it so that somebody else can build up stock. We will do it on an equitable basis, a program. This equitable distribution is based on a very well thought through program together with Edward Nathan or ENS on the principle of what is equitable. We will use that stock to ensure that customers and consumers benefit from our current higher level of finished goods stock. We were going to discount it over the past month into the market, a bit to balance our stock and a bit to improve our cash position. We will now no longer do it, but use it as a strategic measure to compensate for the possible future shortage of broiler supply.
The second question is, what is the 3 kilogram increase mean in percentage terms to current prices? I'll repeat the question. What is the 3 kilogram per kilogram increase mean in percentage terms to the current prices?
Risa, first, I just want to focus on the word increase. Wat is nou? Wat gaan nou aan?
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, Samil, the second part of your question, how has the lower soft commodity prices in recent months affected the cost base? Is there more planned capex for load shedding? So again, it's a two-tier. Let's answer the second part first. Outstanding capex is approximately 100 million rand, which we've put on ice because we've got other measures, and that's purely when we look at our balance sheet and our financial situation and affordability. That is a water pipeline from the river for which we already obtained a water license and is far down the line with regard to the planning thereof. That will make us completely independent from any water infrastructure that are defunct from the municipality in Standerton or Lekwa. That pipeline will be built. It's now a timing issue. We stay close to our board on when we will trigger that. It will most probably happen over the next 2 years, but definitely not in the first year. We might start with that project, but in the long term, that 100 million will be well spent on having an operation that are no longer impacted by the defunct municipality of Lekwa. The raw material prices from a maize perspective have come off a bit. It's went back north again. There's a couple of issues that we have to look at here. Is obviously the Black Sea corridor. It is the lower production in the United States. It's our better than average crop year. And in the middle of all of that is our weakening currency. If the currency was still around the 17 rand, we would have seen local prices now about 200 rand lower than where they are. So the big benefit was offset by the weakening of the currency. We have got the second highest crop in our history, which is good for South Africa. The opposite side of the coin is the weaker crop in the States and the corridor on the Black Sea, which put an imbalance on the global balance sheet of maize. And that is determined by the Chicago Board of Price. And we think there's downside there, not immediately, but this El Nino impact is something to watch out for. We believe it will have a lesser negative impact in South Africa as before, because we most probably sit on the best situation with regard to soil moisture than what we've had over many, many years. So we don't see a drop of acreage being planted by maize farmers going into the new season. But the benefit of El Nino is better rain weather in the Americas. And we also need that for a bigger bumper crop to better balance the world balance sheet. That might bring Chicago off. And if the rand stays stable, and if we plant the same acreage, we don't foresee that as a massive event coming up. Unless it's so extreme, way beyond what is predicted. So, yes, maize prices have come off, but then soya, unfortunately, which is part of that, has countered a bit of that. So input cost will be slightly lower going into the first half of our next period, but not at such a level that you can use that to counter the additional input cost of load shedding and avian influenza.
Thank you, Chris. If we can just maybe go back to Sunil's one question. What is the 3 kilogram increase mean in percentage terms to current prices?
Okay. I am very afraid, Sumil, of increase. If the media go out and say there's an increase in prices, the pricing level in the system is already at a level about 8% higher than where we are now. But we had to discount from that price level. So the 3 rand, if you draw a straight line and you want a straight answer, is about a 9% correction in the selling price of chicken. We were there for a short while, had to come off that pricing levels because of a number of other reasons. The winter, the big birds, still high levels of imports, dumping, and also producers expanding. So the 3 rand equates to about 9%.
Thank you. Arisha Shamral from Network 24. Arisha, your first question has been answered previously. What is the impact of the anti-dumping duties on Astral? Your second question, in the past we have seen chicken shortages at, for example, KFC due to avian influenza. Can we expect something like this again?
On your point 2, Arisha, the shortage that we have seen in the QSR market where the likes of KFC, Spur, Nando's operate was not because of avian influenza. It was directly related to load shedding. Load shedding caused that you had to keep your birds longer, they grow bigger, and the bigger bird on average is not the typical product that you supply into the QSR market. So load shedding brought about a shortage of a specific weight group of chicken, and that was corrected soon afterwards, and the whole of the QSR market is now showing good signs of recovery, and some of them beyond pre-load shedding situation and pre-COVID. But the short supply of smaller chickens to the QSR market was the reason for that shortage, not avian flu. Avian flu could have a positive impact on KFC because at one point in time you're going to have more younger birds in the system. If you replace your breeding stock after the avian influenza event. So we don't believe that market will be short supplied in the near future.
Thank you, Chris. The third question has also been answered in a previous statement. Chris Logan from Opportune, thanks for the update in dealing with these extraordinary brutal conditions. Is this not the first time ever that Astral, a best cost producer, has made a loss? And secondly, can you give us an update on your efforts in respect of alternative power, as I recall you were taking advice from a top international consultant?
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Yes, since our listing in 2001, the 19th of April, this is the first time that we have made a loss. We have previously made a loss in the poultry division on its own. This time around, the massive losses in the poultry division has also carved away the profits we make in the feed division and elsewhere in the business and in Africa. So it is severe, and you are perfectly right there. If you go and add up all these additional abnormal costs of AI and load shedding, and you count it back as an abnormal event that might not be repeated in the future, we would have been most probably in our third, fourth best performance year of our history. So it is severe. One thing we must remember, part of that abnormal load shedding cost and the impact thereof on our farms will now become embedded cost. That embedded cost is especially the cost of running your diesel generators to prop up your water and to keep your abattoirs running. Now that cost, as we sit here at the current diesel price, on average, load shedding stage 6 runs up to 45 million rand per month. That will not go away. There's not any indication or any report coming out of Eskom of any one of the 3 people trying to run the thing that situation will improve over the next 2 years. What they say and what the specialists say about Eskom, we're going to be in this situation for at least another 2 years. And beyond that, nobody can answer. By that time, we hope that private entities generate enough alternative energy to make up for the shortfall. But 45 million rand of that cost per month is now an embedded cost, part of your production cost. And that is why myself and some of the other CEOs say, what is driving price inflation in this country? Is it profiteering? Well, you can only profiteer if you move your margins from single digits to high double digits. We are negative margins. The price movement or correction is not profiteering. It is a corrective measure to cover the additional costs brought about mainly by our defunct state enterprises that's supposed to deliver a basic service, and some of that cost will derive from the cost impact of avian influenza. Yes, we have contracted a major international consultant. We just don't want to run off every second day with every man and his dog to put up some system. We are looking at Astral from a holistic basis now on how do we spread our risk by introducing other generating capabilities. Unfortunately, in your abattoirs, you cannot depend on solar power or wind power. There's a massive demand for electricity to run those plants. So you need diesel generators. On top of that, there is a list as long as my arm of alternatives currently under investigation. Some of them are already in the process of to put up solar projects around our operations that don't demand the same level of electricity or power as our abattoirs. We've signed a couple of PPAs where somebody else will incur the capital layout, put up a solar farm, and we'll buy back energy from them at a cost below what we pay Eskom. So there is a program and a process. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is now a concerted effort from a central point. As you can think, we operate across the country, different regions, farms spread out across the country. There's hatcheries, there's abattoirs, there's rearing farms, there's broiler farms, and each of them has got a different power demand. Where we can and where it is possible, we will focus on solar energy.
Thank you. Karin Krier from Landbouwwetenskap. Could you please tell us what government should do better to control or mitigate the impact of the H7N6 virus? And do they understand the urgency? And is movement control well enough, for example, between provinces?
Good morning. Look, one can say a lot about government, but we are actively working with them at the moment on a plan to vaccinate our poultry population. That's a tool in the tool bag that one can employ, and the world is looking at it harder and harder, with France recently moving to vaccination of their whole duck, commercial duck population. So the government they do understand the urgency, and if I talk government, I don't talk all government departments here. I'm talking about our recent engagement with Dallard, where they have given their support, which was a big hurdle to jump, to voluntary vaccination of your poultry stock against highly pathogenic avian influenza. That has been a topic of discussion for well over 6 years now. So do they understand the urgency? Yes, they do. I have personally been involved in those engagements that the South African industry has had with them, and we're engaging them on a daily basis. Is poultry movement controlled well enough? The simple answer there is no. Poultry moves between provinces, and Dallard simply do not have the resources to put roadblocks up on every single road to control the movement of poultry. We must remember that poultry does move anyway in the normal course of business. If we move moving rearing birds, for example, or birds that have been in rear to another laying farm, it may be that they move across provincial borders. But what a responsible commercial producer does is test those birds before we move them to make sure they're free of any controlled disease, and then we move them. It's the irresponsible movement of birds that is an issue, and that is where people don't comply with culling guidelines, and then they move the birds off their farm and sell them into the depleted breeder or cull market, and then those birds are unfortunately spread not only within a province but beyond provincial borders. All I can say is that compensation is the driver of that ill behavior. If people were compensated for their losses, there would be no incentive whatsoever for them to take shortcuts, not cull birds, or move them quickly off their farms if they see mortality spiking, they suspect AI, and then the birds are loaded onto trucks and moved into the live bird market. That is the risk, and that happens. And the states simply do not have the resources to monitor that or manage it, and the answer is that they don't.
Thank you. We've got two inventory questions, one from PJ Prinsloo and one from Charles de Villiers from Ashburton. The first question is, have you cleared the excess finished stock and inventory back to normal levels?
PJ, a two-leveled answer. We had two different stock scenarios. The one stock scenario was this big bird phenomenon. That stock has been cleared 90%. So that's out of the system. That product we have to discount. We still have current stock or new stock or right-sized stock in the correct packaging and the correct configuration beyond our model stock. We were going to sell that in the market at discounted prices. Now, with the extent of avian influenza, we're going to hang on to that stock and manage it into the market as we see there could be a shortage of chicken. So what was regarded a month ago as a high stock level, which is still the case, but it's become a strategic asset now, and we will manage that very carefully.
Thank you. I think that answers Charles' question as well. How much of the increase in gearing to 25% has gone into strategically building finished goods stocks?
Thank you, Charles. I think the first part we've answered, and Dries will talk to you about the NRV.
So, Charles, the inventory levels as it was at the end of March has in total remained roughly the same at a rand value investment. The quality of the inventory, however, has improved, as Chris has outlined very, very clearly. If you compare to September, the previous financial year in 12 months, almost 12 months ago, the increase is quite a big number of the cash has gone into investing in inventory. However, the context around reconciling the cash flow and where the cash has gone, you cannot sidestep the fact that the massive cost that we incurred in the correction of load shedding impact on the operational rhythm of the business, as well as the HPAI outbreak controls, is probably the better place to lay the blame for the cost increase or the consumption of cash in the business.
Thank you. Murray Moore from AILIT. Perhaps a silly question, but how tough is it to restock breeder birds?
Murray, thanks for the question. We've obviously got a continual supply of birds that are in rear, which are transferred onto farms or laying farms, as we call them, where they go into hatching egg production. So there is a pipeline of birds there. The challenge in a situation with AI is once you have culled a farm, the farm is under quarantine, and there's a period of time over which you need to clean the farm up, which includes the safe disposal of all the culled birds and material on farm. So that does pose a challenge as it delays the transfer of birds that are on rear onto the laying farms. We are, however, working actively on plans to mitigate that. The problem right now is, and I call it a problem because it's merely a challenge, is that with ongoing outbreaks in certain regions, we already have a couple of farms that will be ready for replacement of breeding stock in a phased approach from in about 2 weeks' time. The challenge being, though, is that we have birds ready to go there, but there's still outbreaks on neighboring farms and amongst other producers in the region. So we're going to have to closely monitor that and manage that. And the best solution to that would be to get to a vaccination protocol or program as quickly as possible so that you provide some protection to those birds. You can restock, it takes time. And obviously, if you lose those breeders, you haven't necessarily planned for that with the replacement birds that are coming through the pipeline. But again, we are addressing that through our parent stock placements at the moment to make sure that there's sufficient parent stock that'll come through the rearing cycle. That's a 6-month process, but it's something that we're following.
Thank you. Anthony Clark. A part of his question has already been answered. I think the one that is outstanding on vaccination is, what would be the cost per bird of being vaccinated?
Anthony, I'm going to take your question there a little bit further. I mean, vaccination is on the cards for South Africa. The industry has agreed that we approach Dialogue with a proposal to vaccinate. They gave the in-principle approval for that. And we have agreed a number of protocols with them around a vaccination or a regime within which you vaccinate your poultry birds. There's two work streams at the moment. One is an urgent application, Section 21 application, to import commercially available vaccines that are available on the global market. Unfortunately, that extends quite well with the H5 vaccine, which is registered in Europe and in North America through the USDA. The challenge for us is that we've got a strain called H7N6 that is infecting Gauteng and Mpumalanga, Limpopo, and Northwest at the moment. The only other H7 strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza that has been recorded in the world is in Mexico. That was a H7N3 strain. You vaccinate against let's call it the type, the H7 type. We have applied to import vaccines, commercial vaccines that are registered in Mexico, although we believe there may be some challenges to that. All the dossiers for these vaccines currently sit with SAPRA. Dialogue has met with them in the past day and are providing further information around the commercially available vaccines. So that is one option. And then we have also domestically, we have geared up a couple of suppliers to produce a vaccine locally. By next Tuesday, they should have approval to put the vaccine into production on a clinical basis. In other words, we need vaccine that we can test to test its safety, not necessarily its clinical and efficacy of the vaccine or its clinical response in the birds, but rather the safety aspects of using the vaccine around people as one example. So we will then gear up the commercial production of that vaccine in South Africa. Obviously favorable because it's based on the local virus. We have managed to isolate that virus. They're busy with RNA sequencing on that virus. That's what's taking a little bit of time. That'll be completed by early next week. And then they can start producing the vaccine. So we are considering vaccination. The industry is. We've supported it. A dose, and over a lifetime of a bird, you would apply a number of doses. We still await guidelines from specific suppliers on that. But let's say it's per dose at the moment. A local cost for the vaccine is around R150 per dose. You will apply a number of these over the lifetime of the bird, possibly 5 to 6 vaccines. So not a considerable cost given the value of your breeding stock and what you lose when you actually cull the bird. That is quite a small part of the cost of ensuring that your birds have protection.
Thank you. Anil Theo from Optimum. Good morning. Could you provide some clarity whether if Astral will be able to maintain their egg bank inventory levels? The current trend of AI persists.
Up to a point, Anil. I mean, you have so much capacity. Where we are right now, with the trend in the outbreak of the disease, that capacity has been used up. And there does become a point where you won't be able to maintain your egg bank inventory levels unless you do a couple of other, or make a couple of other plans, such as importing and hatching, or else. I mean, you know, so that's why we say I think we're sufficiently covered for the short term, at least up until the end of December. We don't know what will happen to this disease. Every day is a changing pattern around the country. And we can only do as much as we can to keep it out of farming units that are not affected at this point in time. And believe me, that is we're doing everything that is absolutely possible to do that. If the current trend continues, it continues impacting our egg bank inventory. It continues to impact our ability to set and maintain the broiler volumes that are coming through the system now. But that's not likely to affect us in the coming couple of months.
But you've got the import option.
Yeah, there is the import hatching egg option. And that is something we will explore. It does come at a cost though, but so, you know, that cost, as I said earlier on in the conversation, we would have to recover that because it's no good you go through all of that cost, importing an egg, putting it in the hatchery, rearing it on a broiler farm, feeding it, and then putting it into the market and selling the chicken at a loss. You know, there'll become a point where the country needs a chicken. So that is an option, something that we've tested many times, and it's one of our contingency plans that we have had in place since 2017.
Thank you, Anil. According to the record here, we note that there's no further questions. We thank everybody for their participation and taking interest in Astral. We are in a dire situation. We do have a very well experienced team in Astral. As we sit here, there's a number of work streams and war rooms trying to measure, control, and manage this AI situation. We believe that together with the option of vaccination, we could see this abnormal circumstances pan out over the next year. In the meantime, there could be a shortage of chicken. We will try to be very sensitive to the consumer on how we manage a typical price versus supply and demand effort into the market. We know our consumers are struggling. We will be very, very sensitive to that. If there are no further questions, we thank everybody who dialed in. Maybe just on a personal note, this is not from my board, and normally this is where I get into big trouble. I've just been pointed out that our share price dropped by 11% as we speak, 20 Rand a share. So for those shareholders and analysts that always ask me, where's the best entry point? I think we're right there now. If you're looking for the entry point into a poultry producer. So thank you for dropping our price, and for those who are looking for an entry point, there it is. With that, again, we thank you. I thank our team, our support from our board throughout this difficult situation, which we keep them updated on all the moving parts in the business. We had a special board meeting less than 48 hours ago to explain the situation, also our plans, and the whole board, the management team, the executive, and all our people on the farms that are going through a very traumatic period where they live on farm to help us to stop the spread of the disease. We thank all our staff as well for their concerted effort in this abnormal fight. We will release a further sense at the time when the board has reasonable certainty. We will bring out a band, what do you call it? A range of what we've done, but we think we are as close as damn it to what the reality is on what we put out in this sense. If not, we now go undercover up to the third week, more or less in November. And by then, hopefully, we will have better news with regard to AI and our efforts to vaccinate birds for the long term. Once again, thank you for your participation and goodbye.